Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to demystify one of the most exciting fields in technology, neural networks. We're going to unpack how we're building machines inspired by the most powerful computer we know of, the human brain.
So let me start by asking you a question. What do you think is the most powerful and efficient computer on the entire planet? Now, if you're picturing some massive supercomputer in a climate control lab, think again. The answer is actually that 3-pound marvel of engineering sitting right between your ears.
And here's where things get really wild. Your brain can spot a friend in a crowd in, a tenth of a second? Think about a bat's brain. It's the size of a plum, but it can process these incredibly complex sonar echoes to hunt insects in midair. A traditional computer, even with all its raw processing speed, really struggles with these kinds of pattern recognition tasks. And it's this amazing efficiency that has inspired the whole field of neural networks.
So if we want to build a machine that can learn and think, where do we even start? Well, we have to go back to the brain's fundamental building block. We need to decode the neuron itself.
You know, a biological neuron is actually a pretty simple little processor. Think of it this way. You've got dendrites, which are kind of like ears, listening for signals from thousands of other neurons. Then there's the axon, which is like the mouth, sending out its own signal. And the synapse? That's the really crucial part. It's the connection point, sort of like a volume knob, that determines how strong the signal is that gets passed along.
Now, one neuron on its own, not a huge deal, but the mind-blowing part is the sheer scale of it all. The human cortex has something like 10 billion neurons, all connected by an estimated 60 trillion synapses. You see, the brain's power doesn't come from the speed of any single part. It comes from this massive, parallel web of simple units all working together at the same time. So, naturally, engineers and scientists looked at this incredible biological design and thought, hey, can we build a digital version of that? And that's exactly what they did. They created a simplified mathematical model to mimic this process, the artificial neuron. Let's see how it works. So, the most important concept in this digital model is something called a synaptic weight. It's just a number, but it represents the strength of the connection between two artificial neurons. It can be positive, which means it encourages the next neuron to fire, or it can be negative, which tells it to hold back. And this is key. These weights are where the neural network stores everything it learns. What happens inside one of these artificial neurons is basically a simple 3-step dance. First, it takes in all these different signals, and each one gets multiplied by its synaptic weight. Second, the neuron just adds all those weighted signals up. And third, it takes that final total and runs it through something called an activation function. You can think of this function as a simple gatekeeper that looks at the total signal strength and decides, okay, should I fire or should I stay quiet? All right, so just like with the brain, the real power, the real magic, it doesn't come from just one of these artificial neurons. The power gets unlocked when we start connecting thousands or even millions of them together into a structured network. Now, the simplest setup is a single-layered network where your inputs are connected straight to your outputs. But honestly, the secret sauce is in multi-layer networks. By adding these hidden layers in the middle, the network can learn much more complex things. For instance, the first layer might learn to see basic edges and lines in a picture. The next hidden layer might learn to combine those edges into shapes like eyes and noses. And that allows the final layer to put it all together and recognize a face. It's this ability to build complex ideas from simple ones that makes them so incredibly powerful.
Okay, so we've got the architecture down, but how in the world does this thing actually learn anything? This, to me, is the most fascinating part of it all. So let's walk through a classic example to really see it in action.
You see, the whole idea here is actually really profound, but also simple. A neural network isn't explicitly programmed with a ton of if-then rules. Instead, as this quote says, it gets its knowledge directly from its environment, from data, for a process of learning.
And one of the most common ways they learn is through a method called supervised learning. The absolute best way to think about this, it's literally like a student with a teacher. We give the network, our student, a problem, it gives us an answer, and then the teacher comes in and says, nope, that's not quite right. Here's the correct answer. The network's job is to slowly adjust its thinking until it starts getting the answers right. So let's make this real. We're going to use a classic problem, teaching a machine to recognize handwritten numbers. Our goal is to feed the network an image of a number, like a handwritten 7, and have it correctly tell us that it's a 7. It all happens in this continuous feedback loop. Okay, step 1. We show the network an image of a 7. Step 2, it processes the image and makes a guess. Let's say it's way off and thinks it's a 1. Step 3, the teacher part of the system compares the guess, 1, to the right answer, 7, and calculates an error signal. Step 4, that error signal gets sent backwards through the entire network, telling every single synaptic weight to adjust itself just a tiny, tiny bit in a way that would have made the guess a little less wrong. And step 5, you repeat this process thousands upon thousands of times with tons of different examples of every number. And here is the absolute key, the whole point of all this training. After seeing all those examples, the network isn't just memorizing the pictures, it's actually learning the underlying patterns, the essential 7-ness of a 7. Its ability to correctly identify a handwritten 7 that it has never ever seen before, that's called generalization. And that, right there, is the true sign that it has actually learned something real. So when you put all of this together, you get some pretty amazing benefits. These networks are great at modeling the messy, complex relationships you find in the real world. They're adaptive, so you can retrain them when things change. They're also really fault-tolerant. Since the knowledge is spread out everywhere, if one little part breaks, the whole system doesn't just crash. And of course, that ability to generalize is what makes them so incredibly useful. So by mimicking the brain's own blueprint, we've created a tool that doesn't need to be programmed for every little thing, but can actually learn from experience. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. As this technology keeps getting better, what seemingly impossible problems will it help us solve next? Thanks for joining me.